Chancellorsville, a Pyrrhic victory, and the road to Gettysburg. The Battle of Chancellorsville was Robert E. Lee's masterpiece, a daring gamble that defied the odds. But victory came at a terrible cost. The Confederacy bled heavily, and the loss of Stonewall Jackson cast a long shadow over the triumph. What should have been a crowning achievement became a hollow echo of success. The South was running out of time. Supplies were dwindling, the Western theater was collapsing, and the Confederacy's grip on the war was slipping. Lee knew he had to act, and fast. Another invasion of the North was the South's last, desperate hope. This decision would set the stage for a clash that would echo through history, the Battle of Gettysburg. Post-Chancellorsville, a fragile calm. By May 10, 1863, the armies had retreated to their camps near Fredericksburg. The fields of Chancellorsville lay silent, but the tension was palpable. Both sides were battered, but only one could afford to wait. The Union Army of the Potomac, under Joseph Hooker, was reeling. Once 120,000 strong, it now mustered only 75,000 men. Casualties and expired enlistments had gutted its ranks. Hooker, his reputation tarnished, clung to command by shifting blame to his subordinates. Lincoln, though frustrated, kept him in place, but with a demand: attack again. Hooker refused. His army was in no shape to fight. Recruitment efforts were faltering, and the draft was still months away from filling the gaps. Meanwhile, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, though victorious, faced its own crisis. The Confederacy was starving. Bread riots erupted in southern cities, and desertions soared. The war effort was unraveling from within. Lee's gamble, the decision to invade. Lee stood at a crossroads. The Western theater was collapsing. Grant was closing in on Vicksburg, and if it fell, the Confederacy would be split in two. Jefferson Davis and Joseph Johnston begged Lee to send reinforcements west, but Lee refused. The railroads were overtaxed, and the journey would take too long. Instead, Lee made a bold, some would say reckless, decision. He would invade the North once more. An invasion could draw Union troops away from Vicksburg, relieve pressure on Virginia, and replenish his army with Northern supplies. But more than that, Lee believed it could win the war. A decisive victory on Northern soil might force Britain to recognize the Confederacy and shatter Northern morale. It was a gamble, but Lee had no other choice. The march north, a race against time. By early June, Lee's army was on the move. Ewell's corps slipped away first, followed by Longstreet and Hill. The Union cavalry, under Alfred Pleasonton, scrambled to track their movements. On June 9th, the two forces clashed at Brandy Station in the largest cavalry battle of the war. Though the Confederates held the field, the Federals had proven they were no longer outmatched. Stuart's invincibility was shaken, and Lee's plans were already in jeopardy. As Lee's army crossed the Potomac and entered Pennsylvania, panic spread across the North. Towns were ransacked for supplies, and free African Americans were kidnapped into slavery. The Confederates were coming, and the Union Army was scrambling to respond. Hooker's fall and Meade's rise. Hooker, still reeling from Chancellorsville, clashed with Halleck and Lincoln over strategy. When he threatened to resign unless given reinforcements, Lincoln called his bluff. On June 27th, George Meade, a steady, no-nonsense commander, took charge of the Army of the Potomac. Meade had no time to prepare. Lee's army was already deep in Pennsylvania, and the two forces were on a collision course. The clash at Gettysburg. July 3, 1863. The battle began almost by accident. On July 1st, Confederate forces under A.P. Hill encountered Union cavalry under John Buford northwest of Gettysburg. Buford, outnumbered but determined, held the line long enough for Union infantry to arrive. The fighting escalated quickly. By afternoon, the Union First Corps, led by John Reynolds, was locked in a desperate struggle. Reynolds fell, struck by a sniper's bullet, and the Union line began to crumble. As the sun set on the first day, Union forces retreated to the high ground south of Gettysburg, Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. Lee, sensing an opportunity, ordered Ewell to take the heights if practicable, but Ewell hesitated. The moment passed, and the Union dug in. Day 2. Desperation and Heroism. On July 2nd, Lee launched a massive assault on both Union flanks. Longstreet's corps attacked the Union left, aiming for Little Round Top and the wheat field. The fighting was brutal. At Little Round Top, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain and the 20th Maine held the line against overwhelming odds, launching a desperate bayonet charge that saved the Union flank. Meanwhile, in the wheat field and peach orchard, the fighting raged back and forth. Union and Confederate forces clashed in a bloody stalemate, the fields littered with the dead and dying. On the Union right, Ewell's attack on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill faltered in the face of fierce resistance. Day 3. Pickett's Charge. By July 3rd, Lee was determined to break the Union center. He ordered a massive artillery bombardment, followed by an infantry assault led by George Pickett. At 3:00 p.m., 12,000 Confederates stepped out from the trees and began their march across an open field. Union artillery tore huge gaps in their ranks, but they pressed on. For a moment, it seemed they might break through. Lewis Armistead, leading his men with his hat on his sword, breached the Union line at the angle. But the attack was doomed. Union reinforcements rushed in, and the Confederates were driven back with devastating losses. Pickett's charge had failed. Aftermath. A turning point. The Battle of Gettysburg was the bloodiest of the war, with over 50,000 casualties. Lee's army retreated to Virginia, pursued by Meade. Though Lincoln urged Meade to destroy Lee's army, Meade's cautious pursuit allowed the Confederates to escape. Gettysburg marked a turning point. The Union victory, coupled with the fall of Vicksburg on July 4th, shifted the momentum of the war. The Confederacy would never fully recover. Epilogue. The road ahead. The war would drag on for nearly 2 more years, but Gettysburg had sealed the Confederacy's fate. Lee's gamble had failed, and the South's last hope for victory was gone. The Union, though battered, had proven its resilience. The road to Appomattox had begun. As the guns fell silent at Gettysburg, the nation stood at a crossroads. The cost had been unimaginable, but the Union endured, and in the shadow of those blood-soaked hills, the promise of a new beginning and a reunited nation began to take shape. The human cost. Stories from the battlefield. The Battle of Gettysburg was not just a clash of armies, it was a collision of lives. Among the chaos, individual stories of courage, sacrifice, and tragedy emerged. John Buford, the Union cavalry commander who held the line on the first day, buying precious time for the infantry to arrive. His foresight in securing the high ground south of Gettysburg proved decisive. Joshua Chamberlain, the college professor turned soldier who led the 20th Maine in a desperate bayonet charge at Little Round Top, saving the Union left flank. Lewis Armistead, the Confederate brigadier general who led his men over the stone wall at the angle during Pickett's charge, only to fall mortally wounded within Union lines. George Pickett, the flamboyant Confederate general whose division was decimated in the charge that bore his name. He would never forgive Lee for the loss. The strategic fallout. A war of attrition. Gettysburg marked the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. Though the war would continue for nearly 2 more years, the South could no longer sustain its offensive strategy. Lee's army, though still dangerous, was weakened beyond repair. The Union, bolstered by its victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, began to press its advantage. In the months following Gettysburg, the Union launched a series of campaigns aimed at grinding down the Confederacy. Grant's Overland Campaign in 1864, though costly, kept the pressure on Lee's army. Sherman's march to the sea devastated the southern heartland, breaking the will of the Confederacy to continue the fight. The legacy of Gettysburg. Gettysburg remains one of the most studied and remembered battles in American history. It was a turning point not just in the Civil War, but in the nation's journey toward unity and freedom. The sacrifices made on those fields helped to redefine the meaning of the United States, setting the stage for the eventual abolition of slavery and the reunification of the nation. Today, the Gettysburg National Military Park stands as a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who fought there. The words of Abraham Lincoln, delivered at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in November 1863, still resonate. The echoes of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg was more than just a military engagement. It was a defining moment in American history. It marked the beginning of the end for the Confederacy and set the stage for the Union's ultimate victory. The courage and sacrifice of those who fought there continue to inspire us today, reminding us of the cost of freedom and the resilience of the human spirit. As we reflect on the events of those 3 days in July 1863, we are reminded that history is not just a series of dates and battles, but a tapestry of human stories. The lessons of Gettysburg, of leadership, sacrifice, and the enduring struggle for a more perfect Union remain as relevant today as they were over 150 years ago.